Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jessica if you're new here, and I'm a woman in long-term recovery. In today's video, I want to talk to you guys about a different form of withdrawals that you may not have heard of or you may not know a lot about. The last video that I did that I posted on Wednesday, we talked about precipitated withdrawals. And today I want to talk to you guys about post-acute withdrawal syndrome. If you hear me saying PAWS, like P.A.W.S, PAWS, that's what the abbreviation is. And post-acute withdrawal syndrome is something that people with substance use disorder experience after the acute phase of their withdrawals has already ended. So whenever you stop using, you're going to go through an acute stage of withdrawals. And most of those withdrawals are physical. I'm not saying all of them, but most of them are physical when you're in the acute stage of withdrawals. You're going to experience the sweating while you're feeling like you're cold, and then vice versa. You're going to be hot and have chills. You go through nausea and vomiting, diarrhea. You're not going to be able to keep much food in your body. Your body's going to be really achy. A lot of people get restless leg syndrome. A lot of people go through withdrawals will go weeks without sleeping. So when you are going through withdrawals, it's a high time for addicts to relapse because, like I said earlier in my other video, and if you didn't watch it, I'll link it up here in the card. If it's not linked up here, I'll link it in my description box below so you guys can go back and watch it. It's a high relapse time for people that are struggling with substance use disorder because we know that we can go back out and use, and if we put that substance in our body again, it's going to put an end to our suffering relatively quickly. When you're going through that acute phase of withdrawals, you go through massive cravings, wanting to use your drug of choice again. The acute stage of withdrawals can last for days, weeks. It just depends. Like anything, when we're talking about addiction, there's so many contributing factors that go into all of this stuff. So there's a lot of factors that go into how much or how little you suffer when you're going through withdrawals, but it's a horrible experience for anybody. After you get through the acute stage of withdrawals, there is a thing called post-acute withdrawal syndrome. And like I said earlier, it's PAWS for short. And it generally occurs 2 months or more after you stop using and after that initial stage of acute withdrawals have stopped. And generally, what will happen is that we'll get through that acute, that initial stage of withdrawals, and we'll get a little bit of time to kind of catch our breath. And a lot of people, if they don't know that there is such a thing as PAWS out there and that it's going to happen to them, are really caught unaware by it. And if you are caught unaware by it, it can be really devastating to you. But when you go through PAWS, it's more of the mental part of it. Most of the symptoms that you experience when you go through withdrawals are temporary. They're exhausting. They're horrible to go through. But most of the time, they are temporary. So if you find yourself going through this, just try to keep that in the back of your mind. And I know sitting here today, I know how hard that is, especially when you're right in the middle of it. I know how hard that is to be going through a hard situation, especially when you're fighting it physically, mentally, and emotionally. I know how hard it is to just keep telling yourself that it's a temporary situation, but it really is. You will get through it. You'll be standing on the other side of it. I don't want to say before you know it, but you will be standing on the other side of it, and you'll be able to look back and be like, you know what? I did get through that. It was a temporary situation. When you start experiencing PAWS, one thing that I want you guys to keep in mind, we have to go through withdrawals because our use, when we were using those substances that we were putting in our body, they didn't just do things to us with the way that we use them. And what I mean by that is depending on the way that you used your drug, like for instance, my preferred method of use was to snort things. I was never an IV drug user. I know that because of the way that I used, I've done a lot of damage to my sinuses. and to my nasal cavity and to my throat, etc. So that's what I mean when I say that we've done a lot of damage depending on the way that we use. So we know that we've done damage to our bodies in that way, but we've also done damage to our bodies in other ways that during our active addiction, we may not think about. And the damage that we do that we may not think or care about during our active addiction is the damage that we do to our brain. Pretty much wreak havoc on all of our brain's pathways, like our brain's pathways to tell us that we need to be rewarded for something. It tells us that our body is in pain. It tells us that we're happy, that we're sad. It tells us that we need to go to sleep, that we're getting pleasure from something, that we're motivated, that we want to get up and do something, just things that people that don't suffer with substance use disorder are normal everyday things for them. Those are things that we have wreaked havoc on during our use. And another thing that is really affected by our use is like our cognitive behavior, our ability to learn new things as quickly as what we would have before we started using, our ability to remember things. So you need to just keep that in the back of your mind when we're going through all this, because I know that when I started realizing that I was having trouble with my memory, it was really upsetting to me. I have significant memory loss. There is a lot of things that I'm having to work on with my therapist and with my counselor that are blocked in my brain because of trauma. But there are things that, because of my use and because of the length of my use and the frequency and the intensity of my use, that I'm just, I've just hurt that part of my brain. That's why I wanted to tell you guys, a lot of these symptoms are temporary. So even though you may be struggling, if you're early in your recovery and you realize that you may be going through PAWS, it might be temporary. So don't get discouraged. If you are struggling with learning new things and it used to be just something that, came rapid to you, or you used to be that person in the room that they could be like, hey, Jessica, what happened on August 3rd, 1996, and you would be like, oh, we were here doing this at this time, and you were wearing a red shirt and black pants and white sneakers, and you can't do that anymore. Just don't get discouraged. More than likely, it is temporary. It's very rare for people to have permanent damage to their brain. Our brains and our bodies are very resilient. They're very strong, and they can actually heal at a great rate, more than we give them credit for. So it's actually been discovered that 90% of opiate users experience PAWS, and 75% of alcohol users experience PAWS. So that's a good portion of us that go through it. And it seems like big numbers, but I choose to look on the bright side of things, because that is a very high percentage of us that struggle with alcoholism or substance use disorder that are going to have to go through this. But all of the papers that I read on this, they all said the same thing. 90% of opiate users, 75% of alcohol users experience PAWS, but all of them on the same turn said that most of the symptoms that people experience when they're going through PAWS are temporary. So yeah, it sucks while we're going through it. PAWS can last a really long time, unfortunately, but they're temporary symptoms. As far as the duration of how long they can last, I couldn't really find definitive timelines. So it seemed kind of that the research into this as far as opiate use is kind of new. Relatively new research means 10 years old. To them, that's relatively new research. So they don't really have it pinned down. And again, I think that's just because people are so different. We all are just so different. Our bodies are so different. And the substances that are out there are so different. When I was still in active addiction, the things that I was using are way different than the things that are out there on the streets now. But from what I read, it can last up to 20 months. They said that in some very rare cases, it will last a year or longer, but they said that that was very rare. So what can you look for? what are you going to experience when you're going through PAWS? It's pretty much the same like mental and psychological symptoms that you go through when you're going through that first acute phase of withdrawals. You don't experience the same physical symptoms. So that's a relief. That's a good positive thing to look for, right? Because nobody ever wants to go through that ever again in their lives, right? Like once we get in recovery and we are dedicated to it, can I just say never? We never want to go through that ever again. Nobody ever wants to go through the restless leg syndrome, or those crazy sweating while you have chill bumps all over your body. Nobody ever wants to go through that. PAWS is more of the emotional and the psychological symptoms. That's what you're going to be dealing with. And it seemed to me, and the research and from my personal experience, that it was kind of like a roller coaster of emotions. So the anxiety, the panic attacks, your depression is going to be kicked up into high gear. Your motivation is going to be kicked off. A lot of people suffer with thoughts of suicide. People that are going through PAWS experience pretty dramatic mood swings. I know what I noticed the most about mine was my depression. My thoughts of suicide were really high, and my mood would swing, violently. And I do have, I've been diagnosed with major depressive disorder. I don't have mood swings, I guess is what I'm trying to say. If I'm down, I'm down, for a couple days. It's not up and down, up and down, up and down throughout the whole day. If I'm down, I can feel it, as soon as my eyes open in the morning. I know that unless something pretty major happens, that's where I'm going to stay all day long. Like I said, it's a roller coaster, and that's the best way that I can think to describe it. Another thing that you experience when you're going through PAWS is fatigue. And it's like a bone deep fatigue. But on the flip side of that, you also fight insomnia, because even though you are that tired, you can't sleep. And that sucks. There's just no nice way to say that. It just sucks because, you're fighting through this fatigue and you just feel so worn out all the time. Your energy levels are down, you're fighting this depression and your mood swinging, and you're riding this roller coaster, and all you want to do is just lay down and sleep, and you can't. And that just sucks big time. But anyway, let me try to get through this list. And by no means is this a exhaustive list of all the symptoms that you can have when you're going through PAWS. PAWS is nothing to be messing around with. And that's why, again, I'm going to tell you, if you're going through this, do not do it alone. If you have a friend or a loved one that is going through this, please don't leave them alone. Be there with them and support them in a healthy way for you and for them. Brain fog, memory loss, general cognitive impairment, obsessive thoughts, and obsessing about use, because right under that, in every article that I read, then it started talking about cravings. That would be horrible. It wears on so many people, because you get so far in your recovery, and a lot of people don't experience PAWS until they are 2 or 3 months into their recovery. Even if you don't experience it, 3 weeks into your recovery, 3 weeks is a long time to be into your recovery. And say you get a week into your recovery, and that first week you go through that acute phase of withdrawals, and then you get a good week, and you're, we call it the pink cloud. I'll talk about that in another video, but you get that good week, and, you start to see glimpses of what it can be, what your life can be without your addiction. And you just start to see these little snippets, and you start to feel this hope inside of you spring up. we're on shaky ground. You know, we're like back to basics, learning how to walk again. And so you get that good week after you go through hell, you know, going through all the physical withdrawals, and you think you're doing good, you're rocking and rolling, you're getting your crap back together, or you're at least getting a plan, you know, to get your crap back together. And then out of nowhere, wham, you just get hit with all this other stuff, and you get hit with all these cravings and this depression and these mood swings, and you lose your ability to sleep. And then it just seems like your brain is like turning against you because you can't remember stuff, and you can't, you know, you're struggling like learning how to do stuff again. And, you know, it's a really hard time for people that are new in recovery. It is a really hard time for us, because you just feel like, you know, when you're new in recovery, you feel like you just got out of a war, that you were fighting against yourself. And when you get through the physical withdrawals, and then you have to go through PAWS, which is pretty much, like I said, the mental, the emotional, the psychological withdrawals of it all, it's very defeating. And it's hard. It is hard. And I'm not saying that any part of this is easy at all by any means, because it's not. It's not easy. Recovery is fucking hard. And it's not just about laying the dope down. A lot of people, you know, say, well, why don't you just quit? And then you could just go back to being the person that you were before. Because it's not that easy. You know, if it was that easy, we would all do it. You go through cravings, you start craving that drug again. And when I first got into recovery, I would not talk about my DOC, because if I would talk about it, I would crave it so bad that I could taste it. I could smell it. And I refused to talk about it at all, because it was very triggering to me. So I wouldn't, you know, I just refused to talk about it at all. And then when I went through PAWS, I got hit with all these cravings of it. And, you know, it just kind of hits you out of nowhere. You get a craving for something that you haven't thought about in X amount of time. And when you go through active addiction, where your whole life, every minute of every day is consumed by, do I have enough? If I don't have enough, where am I going to get some? Do I have enough money? You know, who am I going to get it from, etc. I mean, your addiction consumes your whole life. Whether you're good at hiding it or not, it consumes your whole life. From the time you wake up in the morning until the time you go to sleep at night. That's all you're thinking of. You may be able to put on a very good facade for people to see on the outside, but in the back of your mind, that's all you're thinking about. Your addiction consumes you. So when you get into recovery and you get a break from thinking about that, and then all of a sudden you're hit with a craving for that thing again, it hits you like a train wreck. So when you or your friend or your loved one or whoever is going through PAWS, be very mindful with them, because it makes us feel like we're losing control all over again. And a lot of us that are in recovery, it takes us a very long time to feel like we are comfortable in our own skin again. And I hear a lot of people in recovery say that. It was one of the very first things that I wrote down when I got sober, that I just didn't feel comfortable in my own skin. I felt like I had put someone else's body on and I was walking around in it. So just please be mindful with us. Hey guys, I know this is a little weird for me to cut in on a video like this, but I'm going to end this video here because it's getting extremely, extremely long, and I know it's kind of abrupt and that sucks, but I would rather give it an abrupt ending and just slide in here in the editing process and tell you guys what I'm doing than have a hour-long video, because that's just too long, in my opinion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end it here, and then the next video that I post, which will be Friday, will pick up the end of it. And the next part of it is more like what you can do to help you deal with it and how you can get through this part of your recovery journey, because dealing with PAWS is a really hard part of your recovery journey. When you hear a addict say that we fight for our recovery, we fight for our recovery. Sometimes every step of the way. So the next part of the video is more just how you yourself can deal with it and make a plan to deal with it. And then if your loved ones are watching you go through it or trying to help you go through it, kind of like tips and tricks, things that they can do to ease the process of it, make it a little bit easier on you, how they can understand it, etc., things like that. I know it's an abrupt ending and it's kind of weird. I'll get better at that as I go along, but for today, this is what it's going to be. So I'm going to end it here and just let you know that the video that I post on Friday will pick up where this one left off. So I'm not going to leave you hanging or anything like that. So today will be part 1. And then Friday will be part 2, and that should be the end of it. Anyway, so that is where I'm going to end today's video. Just wanted to pop in here and let you guys know what the heck I was doing and why I'm wearing 2 different shirts in one video. I will see you guys again on Friday at 3 o'clock, 3:30 at the latest, because we know how I am. In the meantime, stay safe, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. If you guys need help, please don't hesitate to reach out. If you need Narcan or if you need to be trained in Narcan, you know where all my contact information is. It's in the description box below. Do not hesitate to reach out if you need me or if there's anything that I can do for you. I will respond to any and all messages. I will see you guys on Friday. Until then, like I said, take care of yourselves. Stay safe. And I will see you then.